Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm here today as a resident of St. James. I've called Northampton home for 8 years. I'm also here as a spokesperson for No Monster Incinerator Northampton, which is a grassroots organization or a campaign to oppose the gasification incinerator. We commend Councillor Eales for listening to the concerns of the residents and proactively putting forth this important motion for a referendum. We believe this proposed gasification incinerator would have far-reaching and detrimental implications for our community. We support the motion for referendum as a democratic opportunity to give the residents of this community a true and clear voice in this decision. This decision will impact the everyday lives of this community for generations. We respectfully ask for your support. This is an extraordinary proposal and an extraordinary opportunity for democratic involvement. We ask for your extraordinary support. Please vote yes for this motion for referendum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Graham Croucher, St James Residents Association, speaking in support of the motion. Some councillors will know more than others about the waste of power plant proposal. Others will have less interest, as it is proposed to be located miles from your divisions. But I'm sure if this is a HS2 or a motorway being proposed to be built 200 yards from people's houses, then you would rightly wish us to know about the perils of any proposal. In St James, we have a proud record of defending our interests, and the 2011 campaign to save our library should serve as a gentle reminder. We will even put such interests above watching the national team. Well done. Let me be crystal clear, Mr Chairman. This is a growing action group, and St James will not be silenced on this issue. We are no different to the people who live in the villages. We want information and a say in what happens in our village. We stand ready to defend our right to democracy. We also stand ready to assist in providing that democracy. As a former invited board member of the Community Interest Company, I am acutely aware of the lack of consultation to residents that I represent, as I am of their concerns and opposition to this plant. This opposition has been largely brought on by the developer's own inconsistency in supplying credible information. Of the information that has been available, much has been subject to repeated change. I personally have witnessed many inconsistencies from the developer. When I formally requested a referendum to the developer, Alderman Binley dismissed the idea as a fantasy that would cost millions, and that the planning process alone would suffice. I beg to differ, Mr Chairman. The planning process of development control is not sufficient to capture the views of those who have shouldered the biggest burden of this proposal. Further, if Desborough Town Council can put on a referendum for 10,000 people at a cost of £4,000, then I absolutely believe the developer can stump up the relatively small amount for this. I know the council has a vested interest in the scheme, but what is there to be afraid of? As I've been told, that this is a win-win for everyone. It's a safe plant.
Minute to go.
Sorry?
A minute to go.
Thank you. And everything would be great, and both the developer and the county council should have no fear of these assertions standing the test of public scrutiny via proper consultation, culminating in a referendum of those nearest to the plant. This proposal is a massive issue for the town and deserves the proper scrutiny that only a referendum can bring. Many things have been said so far about this proposal, and let me remind you of some of the notable comments in 2014. And I'll finish on this, Mr Chairman. And I quote, "The company would only submit a planning application for a waste-to-energy station on the site if it had the full support of the people from the town. I will not go to war with residents, and if after the consultation they still don't want the power station to be built, it won't happen." Peter Alton, December 2014. "The council will only agree to the planning and the sale of land when we are convinced there will be no adverse impact on residents." Councillor McIntosh, October 2014. Well, we are far from convinced. Support the motion and the principle of democracy. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Croucher.
Hello, thank you. Well, first I'd like to thank Councillor Gareth Eales for listening to the local community and bringing about this referendum in the first place. I'd like to pledge my support for it, by the T-shirt, I think you'd guessed, and I respectfully ask that you all support it, because one, There has been no public consultation whatsoever. The developer, Rolton Group, or Rolton Kilbride, or whichever guise they're in at the moment, agreed to do so. They signed a pledge to do so, and they broke that pledge. The developer has been giving out misinformation, and they cannot be trusted. 3, it will have a major impact on the community in many different ways. It will affect the health and well-being. And this airfield proposal has a very large risk of failure. This technology has completely failed to work on any commercial scale, both in the UK or the USA. So think about that. The whole of America, they couldn't make it work. They claim it does, but we cannot find one working example of the technology proposed here that actually worked. The community members who are aware of it do not want it. And talking about America, I know it's not Northampton, but they do things bigger and better. They have more money, more resources. They've been trying to make this technology work for many years, and they haven't made it work at all. And the reports I've been getting back from experts in this field is that you get very clever developers bamboozling gullible local officials into these schemes to subsidise it. They make a lot of money out of the process of doing it, whether it fails or succeeds. They make a huge amount of money out of consultancy, etc. They also try and do a fundraise. They make money
1
from
minute
that.
to go.
And the bottom line is it's never succeeded. And we have 3 examples in the UK. We've got the Newcastle, where 700 million was spent. It failed. They pulled out. The one in Dumfriesshire blew up and was a serious health hazard at every point up until the point it blew up. And Isle of Wight failed as well. And Margaret Bates herself, the waste energy expert in the field, has told me personally that we should be seriously concerned about the emissions from the amounts of lorry movements. And she also agreed with me that it's what not being measured is what we should be worried about. It's the PM10 particles, the PM2.5 particles, which at the moment the health report showed 5.6% or 6.3% deaths in Northampton. In fact, nationally, air pollution is killing over 9% of us. It's 16% in China, so we're catching up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. No, and Rafir Ashraf.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this motion on behalf of my colleague. I've been a councillor in St James for the past 2 years, and I've been working really hard to make St James a cleaner, greener and safer community for everyone to enjoy. St James is one of the gateways into Northampton, and I work really hard to organise community litter picks, community walkabouts. I offer advice surgeries, and I'm also working with the local stakeholders to make St James, a part of St James, a litter-free zone area, which is a very first in Northampton. St James has iconic buildings, churches, cobblers, the Saints and many more. However, St James remains deprived in the town centre. Talking to residents and businesses, they express deep concerns about the waste plant in St James. I am very disappointed that the council could bring such a proposal and dump it in St James, especially in a residential area next to a BP station. Don't we suffer enough? Air pollution is high, traffic congestion, match day parking. It has a huge impact in the area, and we have very little resources to manage any work that we can actually do. Health of many are already impacted. I welcome new development, but I also welcome innovative technologies that help reduce recycling and landfill sites. But why in St James? Don't we have enough problems already? The company only consulted in St James and Far Cotton. In my opinion, it should have been far across the town centre to get everyone's views. The council saw a pound sign and thought, let's put it in St James. They won't mind. They're wrong. We do mind. As politicians, some of our politicians don't live in the area, and my concern is you are going to make a decision on our behalf, and I don't want it to get to the stage where a decision has a huge impact on the people of our town. Just the sheer size of the plant is not going to be in keeping of the landscape, especially in St James. I don't want this council to make the mistake as the Borough Council not listening to the people, because they're willing to give away £10.25 million just like that, and they didn't listen to the people. If the County Council
1 minute to go.
Okay. If the County Council grants permission, it will be a life sentence to the people of the town. When you and I are gone, making these huge decisions on behalf of the people, we will leave a huge generation with health problems. I'd like to finish with one last comment. As politicians, we have to make difficult decisions. The people of the town deserve to be heard, and I hope you will not grant any permission until this organisation, Walton Kilbride, find an alternative site outside where it's not impacting on residential area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to check that Mr. Adams hasn't arrived. No. Okay, that's the end of the speakers then. Thank you very much. I'll invite now Mr. Gould to say a few words again about the arrangements now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just really to reiterate what I said this morning. There is no planning application, of course, before you today. The notice of motion talks about consultation or referendum. And I also mentioned this morning the effect of the Localism Act, which does give you a much freer ambit to make comment. However, in respect of those members of the Development Control Committee, while they do not have to leave the chamber, and indeed they can also comment, I would urge caution in avoiding any comment about a potential planning application as and when it is received, which will be dealt with by the Council's Development Control Committee. Thanks, Chairman.
Good, thank you. Right. We'll now proceed with the debate. Invite Councillor Eales to... oh, there he is. Councillor Eales to move the motion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's with great pleasure that I move the motion as the County Councillor for Darlington Spencer. A motion that at the 11th hour, I understand, was attempted to be ruled out of order, but I'm grateful that common sense prevailed in the end. As you've heard from the public addresses, there is quite a lot of concern about the proposition of a waste-to-energy plant or gasification incinerator in St James, Northampton, which is a huge issue and will be a huge building in the heart of a residential area. As such, extraordinary measures need to be taken to ensure a plant has the support of the public, the very people that elect us to do the jobs that we do, and we must remember that here today. This motion is not about this council setting a policy of opposition to gasification. This motion is not about waste disposal. This motion is not about recycled waste. This motion is not about traffic congestion. This motion is not about pollution. These are all, of course, serious matters that are connected to this plant, should it be built, which is why the approach to the issue needs to be appropriate to consider them all effectively. This motion is about asking a developer, Walton Kilbride, to establish a proper consultation with the public in the form of a referendum ahead of any planning decision by the Development Control Committee, at which time all the issues and concerns can be addressed and considered. We need to fully inform the public of the facts and for them to have a real voice into the decision as to whether they support this plant being built. The normal bog-standard form of NCC consultation is not sufficient in this case, and I hope most people in this room will recognise that. To date, there has been adequate public consultation and information sharing with the public, something which Northampton Borough Council's Conservative-run Cabinet, to their credit, recognised last week and removed an agenda item from its meeting which would have given, in principle, lease arrangements to the developers. NBC have instead requested that the developers undertake public consultation before proceeding any further. Well, Mr Chairman, what better form of consultation than a referendum? And I hope my Conservative Borough Council colleagues, or at least the two of them that are still in the room today, will be mindful before voting today as to the position of their Cabinet over the road and the rising tide of concern from the public in Northampton, some of which may well be your electorate. The motion suggests that any residents living within no less than a 1.5-mile radius should form part of this referendum, but myself and community groups are quite happy for the catchment area to be extended if needed. The 1.5-mile radius is simply a minimum area encapsulating what could be regarded as those residents that would perhaps be most affected by this humongous plant. The finer details can be established via dialogue upon acceptance of the principle of a referendum. What I want members to consider is how would your constituents feel if such a plant was proposed to be built in your own divisions? Mr Chairman, How about the people of Geddington? How would they feel? To the leader, how about Joe and Joan Public of Oundle? What about Weedon, Deanshanger, Hackleton? I think the people of those divisions would feel exactly the same as the people of St James, Spencer, Dallington, Kings Heath and other parts of Northampton, so we should do the open and democratic thing and ask the developers to up their game, properly engage with residents, promote what are the so-called benefits of such a plant and let public opinion guide us. If this technology is so safe and the benefits so great, then what has anyone to fear from a referendum? As I'm given to understand it, if you believe the quotes attributed to Alderman Binley, NTC has the potential to save £89 million a year in landfill tax. Well, then it would seem to me that this administration has 89 million reasons to either support this motion and allow the people to have their say, or reject this motion, railroad the plans through at a later date. What's it going to be? There has been much talk about a so-called community interest company. Well, my view, first of all, let's see if the community are interested. But it sounds very much like a self-interest company. In connection, Alderman Binley, who I referenced earlier on...
You've got one more minute, and can you stick to the context of the question, please, and not bring personalities into this?
No, it's not a question, it's a motion, Mr Chairman. In connection, Alderman Binley, who has been...
Can you not bring personalities into this? We're not having personalities mentioned in this debate. It's drawing attention to it. Then it's not.
Okay. In connection, Alderman Binley, who's been the main cheerleader for Rotten Kilbride, his approach has been outrageous and complacent today, although I was touched by his voicemail offering to take me for a pint to discuss issues. But in all seriousness, if the developers wanted a frontman to sell this venture, then boy did they back the wrong horse. Rotten Kilbride, as did the Member of Parliament for Northampton South, who sadly can't be with us this afternoon by the looks of it, stated, if the people of St James don't want this plant, we won't go to war with them. Well, let's hold them to that statement. We can do that today by passing this motion, or alternatively, this council can focus on pure self-interest and you can go to war with the people of St James, Spencer, Dallington and Northampton. Over to you.
I think councillors should be very cautious of talking in any form at all about any particular interests, one way or the other, that members of the council or the council as a whole have in this. I think this is the concern I have when Mr Gould made that comment, and I'm very disappointed to hear the proposer talking in that way. I think we've got to be really, really careful.
Mr Chairman,
we're moving on there
Mr Chairman, then perhaps you're right to Alderman Binley, because it was actually quotes that he made in the press.
Moving on now to Councillor McGee to second the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's extremely important that we second this motion. I know, we all know, that with the rise in recycling, more waste being produced, that something has to happen. Can't keep going into the ground. We all know that. But this is not the answer. To have this incineration nearly out, just about outside somebody's front door, it's not the answer. That's not where it should be. And, you know, Councillor Ailes is absolutely right. If that was in any one of our patches, we'd be doing the exact same thing. We'd be I'd be leading a group if I was outside my estates or the areas that I represent. Each and every one of you would be doing the same thing. This is common sense. When and if this comes to planning, we need to be sure, we need to be absolutely vitally ensured that the residents have had their say. They know what's been produced, what's been suggested. They know the truth. What worries me, Chair, about this whole thing is that the developers wrote to the County Council and said that there was no objections from the residents' group. Clearly that's not true. Clearly that's not true. And if we've already been told that for the developers, it puts a bit of distrust in your head. We need to be able to listen to our residents who's going to live right beside us. If it's built, I, for one, hope it's not built there. Let it be built outside of any built-up area. We'll still get the benefits from it, if it has to be built at all. But I believe, Chair, that this referendum is common sense. It's absolutely common sense. We should, as a council, together, regardless of politics, put the politics aside, if this was any other areas, we'd be doing the same. We should fully back the residents in Councillor Ailes' motion to hold a referendum. So where and if it does come to this council, we've got the real facts in front of us. We can listen to the voices that will be affected, Chair. So I would urge each and every one of us to support this motion and support the people of Northampton here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring along, I think, some experience of how this has been handled in my division. We had a proposal for a wind farm, and the Burton Wold wind farm has been there for several years and has been used as a case study for how to implement new technology in a residential area. The firm that came forward with the proposal was very open, took people, community representatives, to see other wind farms and see what it was like and talk to local people. They put somebody really authoritative in charge of communication with the community, and we held a referendum, a vote on it, which was supported and inputted from the company. And 92% of the people in our community voted for the wind farm, when everywhere else in the county were up in arms about it. But, and then when it was implemented, the same authoritative person was there to deal with any problems with the community, like flicker and interference with TV signals and so on. We have had another example, a firm called Think Environmental, who wanted to do a pyrolysis scheme in our community. And they were a textbook example of how not to do it. And you'll probably recall that the Dante's Inferno, we had a 30-day fire because they didn't know what they were doing, weren't open about their capabilities, and did a lot of naughty things, which this council is still trying to have to sort out, because they buried the rubbish rather than put it in the pyrolysis plant. There wasn't a pyrolysis plant.
1 minute to go.
And they took the rubbish in and buried it, and it's still there. And we had 2 huge fires, and they were not open. They didn't work with the community. Now, I mention these 2 things because, to my mind, and I'm not involved at all in the Northampton scheme, but if you want to introduce new technology and you want to do things that there are a lot of queries about, then you must be open, you must engage with the community, and must engage with community leadership. And that's what I commend in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bearsworth.
Thank you, Chair. I support this motion. I think in some respects we have almost a conflict of interest here, because we are, in this council, responsible for public health, well-being and health. And we don't actually know, I don't actually know, or haven't been informed, what impact this is going to have on our public health of our residents of St James in particular. And I think when the Borough Council, in their infinite wisdom, deferred their decision last week, I think that shows that there hasn't been adequate consultation. People aren't aware of all the facts and figures, and it is a worry for people if they don't have that. So a referendum with the right consultation and the right information might enlighten people into a way of knowing that what might happen is safe. The worry I've got is, over the years, I've probably been a councillor too long, is I remember the rapid transit system, the Millennium Bridges, the various other things that have been brought up to us in the past that were going to change everybody's lives, but fortunately, like the Emperor's suit of clothes, they were seen through quite quickly and dispelled. And I do worry about this. It is a massive, massive building. Somebody was telling me it's almost the same height as St Paul's. And I don't know if that's true. As I say, I need to have clarification. But that is a massive building in a hugely built-up area. And I can totally understand where people at St James are coming from. You know, I would be concerned, where are the benefits? You're going to have hundreds of lorries delivering this waste, and we don't know what the impact is going to be on people's health. So I support the motion. I think a referendum is the answer. This is a huge thing for people to accept, and I think there's no harm in actually getting more consultation and the chance for people to vote for it.
Councillor Glenane.
Thank you, Chairman. I rise to support this, and I'm grateful for St James Residents Association, and in particular Graham Croucher, who's been in at this from the beginning. In my own area in Far Cotton, we've got a resident association, Far Cotton Resident Association, and we haven't had as much input from Norton Kilbride as St James. And I think there's a lack of real information. And we have an affinity with the people in St James because we were flooded at Easter 1998, and the two residents' associations worked together through that terrible flood then. And I think I'm grateful also to Chris Groom when he talked about the right way and the wrong way to do consultation and to find out what people's views are. And I think one of the things that this council can do, because I note in the motion, we're not asking for this county council to pay for it. We're asking for this county council to lay its weight behind asking for proper consultation, so the citizens of this town and those people affected will be able to come to a proper decision, and obviously add that weight to any planning proposal that comes forward. So it's not about this motion is not about the ins and outs of the plant, as Councillor Ells has rightly said. It's about that fundamental thing about consultation and the way that we get people's views and the way that this county council makes sure that this is what's wanted. Because there are problems with waste, and we need to make sure that they're dealt with, but not at the detriment to other communities in Northamptonshire. So we fully support this particular motion at no cost to this county council, but making sure that this county council is standing up for local people in Northamptonshire and across the county.
Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Chair. I rise as somebody that, in my division, there's half of St James, so I've had a lot of representation about this plant, and I think this consultation is absolutely vital. I can see no reason whatsoever why this whole council shouldn't support this motion, because it's not committing the council to spending any money, it's merely committing the council to request the developer to spend the money on a referendum, and why shouldn't they do that? Now, consultation matters desperately. I was delighted to see that the Borough Council had backed away from a planning decision last week on the basis that they felt there'd been insufficient consultation, because my experience of the Borough Council and consultation was Abington Street, when 80% of the respondents said don't do it, and they did it anyway. So on this occasion they appear to have listened, which makes a change. Now, as far as the incinerator is concerned, we need to know what people think. And people on the doorstep have said to me, I don't know enough to make a decision. So the referendum will achieve two things. Number one, it'll inform people, because if there is a referendum, all the sides will have to write to people and give them the information they need. Number two, there'll then be a count of those votes. And that's exactly as it should be. It's called democracy. And fellow councillors, especially those of you that live a long way away, please think about that. Think about what the implications would be if it was on your doorstep, and agree this motion, because you have no reason to refuse it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, can I start off by thanking all the speakers who've come along today to explain to us exactly how they feel and explaining to us what all their concerns are. I think we all have to recognise that we all produce waste, and waste has to be disposed of. And it's been a concern of mine for many years about the emissions coming out of a lot of our landfill sites. I think they've been a concern for quite a long time, and it is something that, as a waste disposal authority, we have been looking at finding alternative ways of disposing of the waste in a much cleaner way than just putting it into a hole in the ground. And I'd like to thank Councillor McGee for recognition of that this is something that we have to look for. But we are the Waste Disposal Authority for Northamptonshire, and as it stands, there is no agreed site. The Borough Council, as has already been said, have not given approval for the use of their land. As an authority, we have no application before us for this particular facility. And I honestly believe, and I understand the worries of everybody here, that it was quite inappropriate for this motion to be put before the Council when there is no site that's agreed and no application before us. I think the local community, I understand why they are so anxious about the potential of this site coming there, and I know that that has been a proposal that they've been discussing. But as it stands, there is no site and there is no application before us. And what really, really concerns me is the fact that, as the Waste Disposal Authority, we are the ones who are at risk of legal challenge by actually saying anything in this chamber that could give an indication of any prejudgment bias on the outcome of that planning application. And for that reason, Councillor Eales, I do think it was really inappropriate to put this before us, particularly in this climate that we're in of litigation and financial risk to the Council. You've said that there's no cost for us for this referendum, but there could potentially be significant costs for this Council over a legal challenge. So, Mr Chairman, I'd suggest that we really should not be discussing that because there is nothing on the table for us to discuss, and this really isn't the place for it to be discussed. I absolutely 100% support when any application comes forward, there must be full consultation before it goes to development control. But as far as any more discussion on this, I would suggest, Mr Chairman, that we really shouldn't say any more.
Are you suggesting that we should proceed to the next business?
Yes, I am, Mr Chairman.
Okay. Now, under rule...
Can we find out what the legal challenge could be, First Chair? Monitoring Officer.
Right, we have a motion that we should proceed to the next business. Do I have a seconder for that? That's seconded.
Point of order, Mr Chairman. Point of order, Mr Chairman. You cannot. This is with.
No, you're not talking about point of order.
I'm sorry. The point of order
What is your point of order?
If you're going to proceed to the order of next business, you have to stand up and say that's what you want to move to without speaking, without any other interruption.
No, you don't.
Yes, you do, Chairman. Chairman, I'm sorry, Chairman, but you do.
It's not true, and I'm the chairman of this meeting.
No, you're wrong, Chairman. Chairman, you're the chairman, but you've got to listen to the Constitution.
I'm not having an argument with the chair. Sit down.
You're not what?
I'm not having an argument with the chair. Sit down.
I'm not having an argument either, Chairman. But you must stick to the Constitution.
What do you think you're doing?
You must stick to the Constitution,
Will you
Chairman.
get out? I'm the chair of this
sorry,
meeting.
but you need to stick to the Constitution.
What do we do about this?
Strictly speaking, he's correct. I'm saying, strictly speaking, you're correct. But, I mean, the process has been done. We have a proposer. We have a seconder. Now, under the Constitution, the mover of the original motion has the right to wind up.
It says here, a councillor may move without comment the following motions at the end of a speech.
Yes, he can do.
Chair,
but he has the
Chair,
right under the Constitution.
The monitoring officer gave a view. He gave it to you yesterday in the pre-meeting. He's given it us twice today. This motion wasn't ruled out of order. It was deemed to be legal. It's on the pad. It's been seconded. It's been spoken to by the public gallery, and we must move to the vote. Whether you've got the courage to vote for it or not, it's a bit different. You must move to the vote.
We're going to move
to the vote. He has the right to wind up. Mr. Chairman,
it's perfectly simple. If motion to proceed to the next business is seconded, and the chairman thinks it's been sufficiently discussed, he will then give the mover of the original motion the right of reply and put the procedural motion to the vote. That's what we're going to do. That's exactly what we're going to do.
That is correct.
So let's go back to where we are. which is that the motion has been proposed, it's been seconded. I now decide whether it's been sufficiently discussed, and I believe it has, because it's been covered by all the party groups in this room. I will then put the procedural motion to the vote. Do you agree that the motion shall be put?
Yeah.
Agreed? That's the procedural motion. Everybody agree? Do you want a show of hands on that? Show of hands. Agreed? Against? Thank you. It's carried. The procedural motion is carried. We will there ask the mover of the original motion, that's Councillor Eales.
That is correct.
To give the mover a right of reply. Would you like to have a right of reply, Councillor Eales? Yes. Right, it's your go. You've got 3 minutes to do it.
Right, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We got there in the end. I'll start by thanking Councillor Groom, Councillor Beardsworth, Councillor Glenane, and Councillor Hope for their support. Now, Councillor Smith. I mean, the gasification process, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert, as you'll probably tell, generates hot air. And boy, oh boy, did we generate some hot air in here today. You've completely missed the point, and I didn't realise that you had a legal qualification, because the monitoring officer has given a view, and it's the total opposite to yours. Your view is, because there's no planning application been submitted, we can't talk about it, whereas the monitoring officer, whose view I'd take over yours any day of the week, I'm saying twice on Sunday, his view is that because there's no planning application been submitted, we can discuss it. In terms of some of the benefits that this council should get should this plant be approved and built, it wasn't I that brought that into the public domain. It was Alderman Binley that brought that into the public domain. So I'll reiterate what I said earlier on, Mr. Chairman. If that's such a grave concern, perhaps you'll do me the courtesy of writing to him and tell him that he's been inappropriate. Would you do that?
Of course not. It's not a member of the council.
Anyway, look, you've heard from members of the public. You've heard from a very experienced councillor and Councillor Gruen about how you should consult and deal with issues. So I ask you now to vote for this motion and give the people of Northampton and St James their democratic say. Incidentally, that I'm not asking for anything special, I'm asking for parity. I'm asking to give the people that are going to be affected by this humongous plant the same courtesy we get at the ballot box when we're elected. So don't be hypocritical and vote for the motion.
We're now moving to a recorded vote. Right, all those in favour of the motion, please.
A recorded vote.
Oh, it's a recorded vote. We're on a recorded vote.
I totally misunderstand what you said, Julie. He thought you were trying to jump and not give him a chance to vote on it. I really didn't understand what you were trying to do.
I don't want to read the Constitution.
We weren't trying to do away with the vote on the motion.
Are you ready? No.
Councillor Sally Beardsworth. For. Councillor Paul Bell. Against. Councillor Wendy Brackenbury. Against. Councillor Julie Brookfield. Absent. Councillor Jim Broomfield is absent. Councillor Michael Brown. For. Councillor Robin Brown. Against. Councillor Mary Butcher. For. Councillor Michael Clark. Against. Councillor Adam Collier. For. Councillor Elizabeth Coombe. Absent. Councillor Gareth Eales. For. Councillor Brennan Glenane. Councillor Brennan Glenane. For. Councillor Matthew Golby. Against. Councillor Andre Gonzalez de Savage. Against. Councillor Christopher Groom. For. Councillor Jim Hakewill. Against. Councillor Eileen Hales. Absent. Councillor Mike Hallam. Absent. Councillor Jim Harker. Against. Councillor Stan Heggs. Against. Councillor Alan Hills. Against. Councillor Sue Homer. Against. Councillor Jill Hope. For. Councillor Dudley Hughes. Against. Councillor Sylvia Hughes. Against. Councillor Irving Swift. Against. Councillor Joan Kirkbride. Against. Councillor Phil Larratt. Absent. Councillor Graham Lawman. Absent. Councillor Derek Lawson. Against. Councillor Stephen Legg. Abstain. Councillor Chris Lofts. For. Councillor Malcolm Longley.
Against. Councillor Arthur McCutcheon. Absent. Councillor John McGee. For. Councillor David McIntosh. Absent. Councillor Alan Matthews. Against. Councillor Andy Mercer. Abstain. Councillor Dennis Meredith. Absent. Councillor Ian Morris. Against. Councillor Steve Osborne. Against. Councillor Bill Parker. Against. Councillor Bhupendra Patel. Abstain. Councillor Suresh Patel. Abstain. Councillor Russell Roberts. Against. Councillor Ron Sawbridge. Absent. Councillor Bob Scott. For. Councillor Mick Scrimshaw. For. Councillor Judy Shepherd. Absent. Councillor Heather Smith. Against. Councillor Danielle Stone. Councillors. For. Councillor Winston Strachan is absent. Councillor Michael Tighe. Abstain. Councillor Sarah Aldall. For. Councillor Alan Walker. Against. And Councillor Malcolm Waters. Against. Thank you.
I think that's the point. We're not against this referendum, we're against this council. Same issue. That's right. Perhaps Heather should have said that. She could have done. I think I didn't clap. I think it's been difficult. I don't know. I think that's what she should have said. Someone should have said. I've been looking at it. It's that we're against the referendum. It's just that we don't want to be appealed against if this thing gets turned down. As we all know, it costs a lot of money. That's what it comes down to. We wouldn't support anything. We wouldn't support anything. Would we? If someone else pays for it. It's not
The motion is lost. 24 against, 14 for and 5 abstentions. Moving on then to the next motion submitted by Councillor Stone.